The F1 2026 regulations have dropped and Formula 1 is about to change dramatically. The cars are getting smaller, the engines are changing, and we're seeing the end of a Formula 1 staple. Here's a roundup of everything you need to know about the future of F1. Let's get into it. That's right, the 2026 regulations are upon us. Well, in a couple of years' time, we'll see them out on track, but we know Formula 1 is all about innovation, pushing the boundaries of what can be achieved in motorsport, whilst also developing the safety of open-wheel racing. And back in 2022, we saw a dramatic change to the regulations, chasing cars that would still have the speed Formula 1 has become synonymous with, but also making cars that are easier to follow. And it hasn't been a roaring success. The team's car development has undermined what the FIA was aiming for, so the FIA went back to the drawing board and opted to wait until the 2026 season, when the new engines are also coming into Formula 1, to address the cars and redesign them for the future. Let's start by looking at the chassis. The new cars in 2026 will be 30 kilograms lighter than the current regulation cars, and that drop in weight comes from the fact that, in general, these cars will be a little bit smaller. The maximum length will shrink by 200 millimeters, the car's width will also lower by 100 millimeters, and the floor width will reduce by 150 millimeters. Along with the wheels actually becoming narrower, the 18-inch wheel diameter will remain the same, but the width of the front tires will reduce by 25 millimeters and the rears by 30 millimeters. So the cars are reversing the trend and actively getting smaller, whilst still incorporating the safety structures like the halo and the roll hoop that we've become used to seeing. Of course, the engines have been talked about for a long time now. They were first discussed back in 2021, and the engines changing for the 2026 season has been a key factor in enticing brands like Ford and Audi to get involved in Formula 1 from then onwards, wanting an engine that is more affordable, sustainable, and has more of a focus on electrical energy. The MGU-H, which collects energy from wasted heat from the turbocharger and exhaust gases, is now gone completely, whilst the internal combustion engine itself will reduce in power from 550 kilowatts to 400 kilowatts by reducing the fuel flow around the car. But to make up for that loss in power from the ICE, the MGU-K, which collects energy from the braking, will have a power increase from 120 kilowatts to 350 kilowatts. That means the amount of energy recovered under braking will double, and means that the engine clearly has a lot more of a focus on electrical energy, with almost 50% of the power coming from the MGU-K. However, the biggest thing that we'll notice as spectators will come in the form of a manual override mode. And this has been designed so that when two cars are battling, the car behind will receive an energy boost to make sure that overtaking is possible. But don't worry, it shouldn't make overtaking too easy. This mode will taper the recovered energy deployment of the leading car after it reaches 290 kilometers an hour, dropping to zero at 355 kilometers an hour, whilst the car behind will get an extra boost from their MGU-K and have access to an override mode, providing the full 350 kilowatts up until they reach 337 kilometers an hour. Hopefully this will mean that the car behind will be able to get up alongside their rival, and the battling will actually happen in the braking zones. And you could think, well, that seems silly, we have DRS for overtaking. And at the moment, you'd be right. But DRS as we know it will no longer be in Formula 1. After 15 seasons in F1, the drag reduction system is being replaced. As these new cars will have 55% less drag than the current ones, the effect of DRS in its current form would be minimal and wouldn't help as much as it does now. So instead, we're going to see new front and rear wing active aerodynamics, which will take its place, and the drivers will be able to switch from Z mode, the higher downforce setting, to X mode, the low drag setup, to increase their straight line speed. It is still a button in the same way that we see drivers press a button to open the rear wing and activate their DRS at the moment, but the reason that this isn't DRS is because the driver will be able to activate this low drag X mode on the straights at any point, whether they're within a second of the car in front or not. The drivers will have access to this button, which will put the front and rear wings in this low drag setting for use on any of the straights throughout any circuit, which then once again deactivates when they hit their braking point, so they have the grip for the corners. I do want to add that with DRS being replaced by this new MGU-K based overtaking system that we've got, we don't know how long the override function will last for, or how many times a driver will be able to use it per lap. We may end up with something like the current DRS system, with requirements and certain zones where you can use it needing to be within a second gap of the car in front or within a given distance at a detection point. But At the moment, when the drivers can use this new MGUK override button still hasn't been figured out, so we may see some tweaking once it gets put to the test in 2026. Along with the changes to the DRS and the active aerodynamics, there are a couple more changes to the general aerodynamics of these cars. The front wing will be 100mm narrower than they are right now, and will have that 2-element active flap, as I mentioned, whilst the new look rear wing will still have that active part. It will still have the letterbox like before, but the lower beam wing has been removed and the end plates much simplified, with the hope that the team's ability to generate dirty air and upset the balance of the cars behind will be much lower. That's why they've also put in mandated pieces of bodywork that inwash the airflow instead of pushing it out and towards the cars behind, as well as the floors becoming partially flat and the diffuser power decreasing, actually reducing the ground effect of these ground effect Formula 1 cars, so the cars don't have to run so low to the ground. And that's everything that we know so far. More details will of course be shared by the teams, and reactions from the drivers will be discussed later in this Canadian Grand Prix weekend. And the full regulations aren't expected to be published until later in June. This isn't the last twist that we're likely to see, and of course the real 2026 cars will probably look quite a bit different. But from my perspective, making the cars simpler and more agile has to be a step in the right direction, whilst also allowing cars to be closer out on track and more overtaking possible. That can only lead to more exciting racing. Which is why I think McLaren, and in particular Oscar Piastri, are in a really good place going into 2026. And if you want to know more about why I think Oscar Piastri is so well set up to be the best racer on the Formula 1 grid very, very soon, click that link and I'll see you over there.